When it comes to gaming retrospectives, the Sonic the Hedgehog series is one of the most requested series for me to cover, and for good reasons. It's one of the most popular gaming series even amongst Nintendo fans. Now, if you were to tell someone that in the 90s, they would probably think you're a little bit crazy. And another reason, the Sonic series has had many games, some being great, others and others downright bad. Considering the legacy of the Sonic the Hedgehog series, I'm honestly surprised myself I haven't really covered it. The only game I did a retrospective on was Sonic R back in 2021 as an April Fool's Day joke, but other than that, I really haven't covered much of the Blue Blur. That is, until now. I will be doing a Treasure episode on Sonic CD, but unlike too many Sonic games out there, I want to make sure this has enough time to cook. I promise you guys, I'll get a DeLorean, it's going to be an event. But in the meantime, it's about time I cover a Sonic game. But which one? What I decided to do was get one of Chumley's expert friends and ask him for advice. He is a self-proclaimed Sonic expert, and his name? Petey Peterson. Wait, why does this sound familiar? Oh no.
It's day 45 of Treasure! I've decided to choose the game for Crocodile Alligator Boy to play. And let me tell ya, I chose very wisely.
You are now watching The Meech.
Sonic Superstars was recently revealed, and surprisingly enough, it looks stellar. It essentially looks like it could be the Donkey Kong Country Returns of the Sonic series, and that's a great thing. All the zones are new, and the 2.5D art direction looks great. Considering this is a Sega production, I can't be 100% confident it'll be a great game, but it's looking very promising. It's also developed by Arzest. Now, where have I heard that name before? One thing I found to be a bit surprising was Sonic Superstars going for a 2.5D art style rather than the 16-bit look from Sonic Mania. Considering Sonic Mania was a game to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the series, I thought it was cool making a throwback game, but in Sonic Superstars, it truly seems like they're bringing 2D Sonic back and evolving it for the modern era, kinda like what New Super Mario Bros. Did for 2D Mario. But the thing is, this isn't Sonic's first rodeo attempting to bring back the 2D games for the modern era, because the series did try it before, and you might not have heard of it or remembered it. But why? This reboot got so critically panned that most fans refuse to consider it canon and disregard its entire existence, and Sega pretty much does the same. Some of the most revered Sonic games are the classic Sega Genesis trilogy. We have Sonic the Hedgehog 1, 2, and 3 and Knuckles, but as it turns out, there's a fourth game. No, not Sonic CD, not the lock-on cartridge for Sonic and Knuckles, a true Sonic the Hedgehog 4. Sonic the Hedgehog 4 released 16 years after Sonic 3 and Knuckles, and it claimed to be the long-awaited sequel many have been clamoring for. That statement alone gave Sonic 4 a lot to prove, and ultimately, it fell completely short. This is why most absolutely despise Sonic 4, and while I do think it's absolutely fair to critique a game based on prior entries, especially with a title like Sonic 4, I wanted to go into Sonic 4 and do a retrospective of it, primarily based on what it is, and not so much what it isn't. That way we'll see if the game is truly as horrible as everyone claims it is, or if it's just a bad Sonic 4. So here's the question. Is Sonic the Hedgehog 4 so bad it's worth wiping from the entire history of the world and the time and space continuum? Or is it actually a hidden gem? Dare I say, a hidden Chaos Emerald? Usually this is where I analyze the story of a game, but Sonic the Hedgehog 4 Episode 1 has no story whatsoever, no opening cutscene to showcase what's going on, but the official description goes along the lines of Dr. Eggman wanting revenge, so he uses his old inventions and improves upon them to defeat Sonic. Essentially, that's Apple making a new iPhone and marketing it to the fans. The plot itself is basic, but it is sorta cool. I think a cutscene showcasing Eggman taking some of his old inventions and reworking them, that could have been cool. Nothing mind-blowing, but it would have given the players an idea why they're playing the game. But hey, the e-reader levels in Super Mario Advance 4 were accompanied by no story either, and I loved playing them, so perhaps the gameplay of Sonic 4 itself can make up for the lack of story. Sonic 4 is a 2.5D platformer, similar to that of New Super Mario Bros., but for the Sonic series. At face value, it looks like your average Sonic game. The controls are what you'd expect. Sonic can run, jump, roll, okay not really, and of course spin dash. But in addition, Sonic can also do the homing attack found in the 3D games. Many don't like this addition because it's deemed to be unnecessary in a game like this, but personally, I found the addition of the homing attack to be great. Defeating enemies is quite satisfying, and you can get some additional airtime with it. This is going to be incredibly embarrassing, but when I went to replay Sonic Mania after 4, I was playing it as if the homing attack were present in that game. The general control is fine, but if you've ever played the Genesis Sonic games before, you will immediately be caught off guard by the physics, or quite frankly, any 2D Sonic game I've played other than this. When you spin dash, you expect to build up speed and gain momentum using the level design to get to faster routes, and beat the level and reach some secret areas, but that's not how it works here. The spin dash isn't reliable at all, and mainly just serves as an attack, not a speed boost. Most of the speed is done for you with the speed boosters plastered all over the place. Now normally, boost pads are used sparingly in Sonic levels to give you an extra boost, but in this game, boosters are literally everywhere in an attempt to give the illusion that you're building up speed. Speed in Sonic games is all about mastery of Sonic's physics, and it's rewarded with being able to reach paths and secret areas you couldn't find before. But in this game, none of that is really present. It also takes forever for Sonic to gain acceleration. For a game about speed and using momentum, Sonic 4 already falls short, but as I stated before, I wanted to analyze the game based on its own merits, not comparing it too much to Sonic 3 and Knuckles, even if it can be unavoidable in some forms of context. But even in isolation, and as a more casual Sonic fan, the physics feel off, and unsatisfactory. Eventually, I did get used to them, but that didn't make them particularly good. Another disappointing aspect is the lack of power-ups. You're left with the basic shield and invincibility monitor. No elemental shields, that's all you get. At least Super Sonic is here, which is always pretty cool. When you use him, you're invincible, can jump higher, and run incredibly fast. You'll just need 50 rings to activate him once you've gotten all 7 emeralds, but it's well worth it. Already, things aren't looking too good for Sonic 4. But there are a lot of games that might be flawed in some aspects, but the good aspects completely outweigh any cons. Perhaps the stellar level design and interesting locations will make up for it. The level design in Sonic 4 is for the most part what you'd expect from a Sonic game. There are a lot of loops, springs, classic Sonic tropes. Perhaps too classic though. The first zone is Splash Hill Zone, which is clearly inspired by Green Hill Zone. But hey, most Sonic games have an equivalent to it, like Emerald Hill Zone or Palm Tree Panic, and for a revival of sorts, it does make sense. I found Splash Hill Zone to be quite fun, having some good level design that takes advantage of Sonic's speed. While having better physics and more natural acceleration would have been ideal, I still found Splash Hill to be quite fun. It doesn't do anything revolutionary, but I found it to be a good time. The second zone is Casino Street Zone, which is inspired by Casino Night Zone from Sonic 2, quite blatantly too like the last zone. Look, I understand Splash Hill Zone, but do you think we're starting to retread a little bit too much now? I found this zone to be well designed for the most part. The second stage has an interesting gimmick where you can run across playing cards, which is kinda neat. Another decent zone with fine level design, albeit not very original. Next up is Lost Labyrinth Zone, which is based on... You know what? This is getting old. Quite literally because, my gosh, is there anything new? It's a zone based on Labyrinth Zone, which isn't even a fan favorite. Quite the opposite. This is where things really start to take a downward slope. The first level is fine for the most part. It has some stupid segments where you need to balance on a ball by pressing left repeatedly, and this is where the cheap deaths really start to become apparent. One thing I can't stand about Sonic games is the amount of times you'll run into an enemy or obstacle you couldn't have foreseen, and it happens far too much in Lost Labyrinth Zone, and it only gets worse from here. Just because platformers will often have darkness stages as a trope, that doesn't mean it's mandated by law to include it in your game. And Sonic the Hedgehog is the absolute last kind of game that darkness stages should ever be a part of. And the second level of Lost Labyrinth Zone truly is a testament to that. You carry a torch running through the level, and guess what? There will be a lot of enemies and spikes you won't even be able to see. So in order to clear the stage and keep your rings, you'll have to slam the brakes, which in a game about speed just isn't fun. And for some unexplained reason, there's a random Donkey Kong Country inspired minecart segment that lasts for not even 10 seconds, and it's really easy to make the jumps too, considering there are giant warning signs letting you know, "Hey dummy, jump here!" And then you'll have to put a torch to a fuse to take out platforms. It's a slow-paced, boring level, but that isn't even the worst part. The worst part is a segment where you'll need to light torches in a specific order to progress. It's a seemingly straightforward puzzle. Shouldn't be so hard to do, right? But no matter what I did, I couldn't get the damn platforms in the right order. I tried nearly everything, yet I couldn't get past this stupid puzzle. Think we're gonna need some help for this one.
Demeech, check this out! I can burp the ABCs!
Hey Birdbrain, since you recommended I play this, how am I supposed to clear out this torch puzzle?
Oh, that's easy. First, you light the torch, then the fourth one, but then you gotta wait 2 seconds, and then finally the third one, and now jump!
Wait, I had to wait 2 seconds in between? Who's gonna guess that? Is this what you call good game design?
Whoever said it was good.
The torch puzzle is one of the most cryptic, brain-dead decisions I've seen in this game. You can actually skip it by going a different route, but the fact of the matter is, it's here to begin with, which is bad game design. Where were the playtesters? Oh my gosh, the third act is at least better. There are some underwater segments, which I'm not a fan of, and there are some more dumb puzzles when you're falling down a waterfall, but it's nowhere near as bad as the second act, though it's not particularly good. The first 2 zones, decent, but Lost Labyrinth stays true to the original and flat out has some bad design and stupid gimmicks. No sir, I don't like it. The final zone is Mad Gear Zone, which is similar to the Metropolis Zone. And would you look at that? Not a single original zone idea. This game should have been released in 2012 to coincide with Drake's The Motto, because you obviously lack originality. YOLO! To be fair, this is the most original zone out of the ones here, and the first level is actually quite fun with some interesting wind gimmicks, but the rest of it where you're jumping off cogs that run at the frame rate of the Pokemon Scarlet and Violet windmill, yeah, not fun. The level design is at its best fine, but it does nothing to really stand out, and some of the levels are just aggravating. Perhaps bosses could be cool? No, it's more or less the same stagnant monotony the rest of the game offers. These boss fights are over quickly and aren't anything special, but perhaps not being anything special is a good thing, because we haven't even gotten to the aforementioned special stages. The special stages in Sonic 4 have you rotating the stage to access the Chaos Emeralds, very similar to Sonic 1's special stages, except instead of moving Sonic around, you're rotating the stage this time, which in my eyes feels slightly better, but these can get so frustrating, not only because of the goal obstacles you can bump into, but because they're timed. Sometimes, you're barely given enough time to the point where it's borderline unfair. You can retry them, fortunately, unless you hit the goal obstacles. Accessing them can also be incredibly annoying. Like I mentioned before, it takes 50 rings at the end of the stage to unlock the big ring, but if you have the misfortune of missing that jump, you're gonna have to restart the level all over again and collect the 50 rings. It is so frustrating. Sonic the Hedgehog 4 Episode 1 isn't atrocious, but it's monotonous, and it's not like it does anything particularly incredible either, but with annoyances like the questionable game and level design, as well as the physics, I'm not exactly inclined to keep on playing it, but even in bad Sonic games, the presentation is usually still good. Sonic games are known for excellent music and graphics, and Sonic 4 is no exception. Right? Remember those old Flash games? I remember playing a ton of the Mario Flash games growing up. These were fan-made games made in Adobe Flash, and a lot of them were quite good. But when the art style wasn't the classic tried and true Super Mario All-Stars one, you'd get stuff like this. You see that? That is what Sonic 4 reminds me of. Visually, it just looks off, and it doesn't even look like an official Sonic game. The models have a weird sort of shading to them, especially with Sonic. I do like the way some of the zones look, specifically the Sunset Stage and Splash Hill zone, but oftentimes, there's just too much going on, and it's way too bright. During the first act of Casino Street, I felt like my eyes were melting out after looking at King Neptune's bald head. I watched enough of the Problem Solvers growing up. Did I really need to go through this again? I don't mind that Sonic has his modern design. Plenty of good 2D Sonic games have it, and it's overall a good design. The problem is that the game doesn't look good or have an identity of its own. It's just smeared in nostalgia. Music, I thought, could be a saving grace. Sometimes it's alright. I love the Splash Hill theme, but the problem is a lot of the music is mediocre or even bad, especially the boss theme. At least the sound effects are good, so I guess that's a plus there. But unfortunately, Sonic the Hedgehog 4 has no style. It has no grace. This game is probably going to be an utter disgrace. In terms of content, you have 16 levels and a few achievements if you're playing it on Xbox. It's a very short game unless you want to go for the trial and error of the special stages to unlock the Chaos Emeralds, so you can stretch a 2-hour game to a 5-hour one. It has less content than the first game on Sega Genesis, but even on its own, that's pretty short. To be fair, it was only $10, but the fact of the matter is, this is a sequel, and since when did sequels mean having less content? This was 12 years before Nintendo Switch Sports, by the way. There's not a lot of content, but fortunately, it's not that overpriced. But what I will critique is the release idea for the game. You know why it's called Sonic the Hedgehog 4 Episode 1? It makes the game appear to be
not unfinished, just incomplete.
Because the game isn't even finished. Like I said before, this game was planned to be part of an episodic trilogy, which doesn't even make sense. Why not just develop a full-on Sonic the Hedgehog 4 instead of splitting it up? Well, there are actually two reasons. One is that Sega wanted to make a quick buck, releasing half the game now and the other half later. But the real story of how Sonic 4 turned out the way it did is quite fascinating. Originally, Sonic 4 was going to be a mobile-only game called Sonic the Portable, which explains its rather short length, the presentation, and standard theming. And for that, I think it would have been fine. But Sega decided to market it as Sonic the Hedgehog 4, and then put it on consoles. Because of the name alone, the expectations were sky high, and as a Sonic the Hedgehog 4, it fails miserably. But if it wasn't called Sonic the Hedgehog 4 and was its own thing, would the game actually be better? And is it overhated? So far I've established Sonic the Hedgehog 4 Episode 1 has some decent level design and can be fun, but it's hindered by poor game design choices, a lack of originality and identity, a bad presentation, and a low amount of content. So what's the verdict? Let's say Sonic 4 either ended up being called Sonic the Portable or something else. Perhaps Sonic Remix? Honestly, I think if that were the case, the game would have just faded into obscurity and wouldn't have the reputation it does now. How did Sega's genius marketing strategy of naming the game Sonic 4 turn out? The reception was so bad from the fans, the third episode was ultimately scrapped, and Sega doesn't even acknowledge it anymore, beyond a few social media posts, and they'll never have the chance to name a game Sonic the Hedgehog 4 ever again. But even without the Sonic 4 name, it's a bland, mediocre game at best that's incredibly forgettable. I do think from a design standpoint, and I know this is going to be a hot take, that it is better than Sonic the Hedgehog 1, but that isn't saying much, and is by no means a standard, considering that the first game released 19 years prior. Sonic the Hedgehog 4 gets the ranking of trash, albeit a light trash. It's more of the equivalent of a smashed and stepped on McDonald's cheeseburger, oozing with mustard and ketchup. Essentially, something that could have been good, but ended up being bad. But in the end, unless you're interested in the history of the series, don't even bother. Maybe episode 2 is better, I'm not sure. But you got Sonic Mania, and you're gonna get Sonic Superstars coming up. Or even Sonic the Sketchhog. Even that's better. Okay, maybe not, but go ahead, play most of the other 2D Sonic games. This one isn't worth your time. So what do you guys think? Have you played Sonic the Hedgehog 4 Episode 1 before? Let me know in the comments, and as always, keep calm and da-da on.